Charles, it's been a day of congressional comedy. How are you?
Tragic comedy.
Exactly.
It's great to be back. Back in HQ here. The art department has outdone itself once again.
Thank you.
This picture, forget me for a second, but the picture of Hillary with Trump in the background, there's no question that the chalice of malice is Hillary Clinton. And
do you remember this movie, Absence of Malice?
Vaguely.
Yeah, because I don't really know anything about it other than I was a kid when it came out and it sounded tough, but I had no idea what that meant.
Well, what I think, it's interesting, here we are on our, I don't know how many, this is 246 or something, 247?
Maybe more.
Is that right? Yeah, because I think we have some that are not counted.
Whoa. That's not this is what we
This is 247 according to the...
Right. The playlist here.
Right. So, and when we did our first one, I'm not even sure our first one was broadcast in June, the one from the World Trade Center. Maybe we didn't do
Correct,
that.
It wasn't.
So we've got comedy gold in the attic.
Definitely, we could do the lost episode someday. Like, remember the Honeymooners? Sometime in the 80s or 90s came out with the lost footage, and it was like honeymoon episode. Nobody ever saw.
That's great. So Honeymooners were one of my all-time favorite. That
Me too.
And Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld. But anyway, when we started on this, we did actually in the very early days, we did the Clinton business model or the business model for charity fraud or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then, it was such a big landscape, and it's, I think, fitting that our guest, who's going to be with us at 4:00, is a former senior executive at Fox News. Before I met you, I had many interactions with the Fox people, and I tried to explain to them the enormity of this scandal. And they just didn't really, they couldn't figure out how to work it into something that could be marketable at Fox.
Right.
Because, of course, at Fox, the constraint is if you're going to try to be fair and balanced, you've got to have a guest who's liberal and a guest who's conservative in theory. And then on top of that, you got to fit it in. Each segment has got to be, you got to have a moderator, and then you got to fit it in between an ad for Peyronie's disease and My Pillow and this and that.
It's Peyronie's Cruises. Cirillo Cruises, sorry.
Cirillo, I think, yeah. But Peyronie disease.
Well, but it's also got to be favorable to the Murdochs and socialism and deep state activities, or it's not getting on there at all.
Well, at the time, but back in this was really 2015, 2016, and at that time, I have to say that they gave me a lot of time to talk about the Clinton Foundation, various aspects of it. But when you think through, is there going to be a fit with cable news and this story? There'll be a fit eventually when somebody wants to go and say, well, how in the hell did we come up with this? And
when you say a fit, you mean like a conniption or a lock and key?
I mean a lock and key. I mean, how do you convey this material to an audience that is either pitched to, is not really interested in business at all, and certainly not in charity law and charity, but might be very interested in fraud and crime. Right. So what's the best way to skew that? And then if you're going to skew it, at what time? And should you do, do you want to do just, Peter Schweitzer on Clinton Cash did a 1 hour special. Do you do a 1 hour special, or do you do what we've been doing? 500 hours, actually. Technically speaking, we're close to 500 hours all in. And I feel and felt then at the time that this approach would be a lot more sensible, because we can do the deep dive into a small slice of it. We can then come back and do another one and another one and another one. And then it will fall to me probably to go back and reorganize it and say, look, if you want to go on a straight path through all this chronologically, look at this, then this, then this, then this, and let's see whether the investigators actually get to the bottom of what you and I really see here. And in that way, I don't know if as a kid you played much cards, but I was exposed to bridge.
Comic book poker.
Well, I was exposed to bridge at a young age by one of my best friends' families were all into it. And there's a way, bridge is a card game that is somewhat intricate. You can waste a lot of time with it. But one way to play bridge is you have multiple teams get together, and all of the teams are dealt the same set of hands. And then you score yourself against every other team. Everyone plays, let's say, 20 hands, and you decide, who did the best with each set of cards.
Right.
And that's called duplicate bridge. And that's really what we're doing here. We have in process, I believe, investigations inside and outside the U.S., in theory, looking into the Clinton Foundation. And in practice, I believe they're looking way beyond the Clinton Foundation. But the problem until recently, in let's say several months or years, has been that once you got to a place where the Clintons would be exposed, the Clintons would, whisper into the Bush's ears and say, "Listen, would you tell these guys
kill
to
this guy?
Yeah, kill this guy for us." Right? But it's to a place now where I think the Bush family is irrelevant in Republican politics at this point. I hope the Clinton family is irrelevant.
Yeb is not going to step in.
Yeb is not going to wipe the banana peel off his feet and try to raise another $100 million to do anything. And really, at the time, I was so pissed off at HW and then Bill Clinton for what they did. Yeah. And we'll get into that in a second. That I was prepared to give W a shot. Because I was prepared in the beginning to say, look, your father was horrible, but Bill was so much worse. At least let's try to do something sensible here. And of course,
like the dumbed down version.
I know,
of H.W. Bush.
Dumbing down Miss Daisy or whatever.
Now, just real quickly, Charles. So Mr. LaCorte is in communication with me. He wants to move the appearance up to 3:30.
That's perfect.
We'll call him in 25 minutes.
That's great. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah.
So we'll be able, and we will be laying out for our viewers and readers, actually, a more concise guide to all of these episodes with additional information and analysis as a motivating factor for the investigators to think that they better not think they can cut this off and just say, "Oh, it was actually just over here was a problem, and we give him a $10,000 fine, and maybe Charles will go away." That's not fair. It's not reasonable. And a lot of people here really need to be sent away to prison for long periods of time, because what this is all about, it's not about this period we've been talking about it for a while, 1988 to the present, in my view, is a time frame where having emerged from Jimmy Carter, having emerged from the Vietnam War, having emerged from mess after mess, the United States was on a trajectory where we really could have been a lot more vibrant economy had we focused on lawful nationalism as opposed to embracing unregulated globalism. So under H.W. Bush, who had of course been our first ambassador to the People's Republic of China and head of the CIA and other dubious entries on his resume, under him and then under Bill Clinton, what we allowed to do, we allowed the Chinese and the Indians, the people in India, to steal our technology. We allowed our top CEOs to get away with
They gave it to the Chinese.
Or let them steal it either way. In exchange for relatively modest, paltry contributions to the various politicians and across the political spectrum. We allowed that to happen. We allowed the universities to jack up the pay of their teachers, to let the professors also be consultants and investors, to indoctrinate our children in bullshit, frankly, in Gruber-esque bullshit that doesn't make any sense. We allowed them to promote this unregulated globalism, and in the process, we really did hollow out the economy. And all the people, who love Clinton and love Bush walk around like they're the geniuses and we're the idiots. Whereas any smart person who's ever been in business knows that if your business is pumping out these sort of videos, and we do stuff just live without a script, but you employ script writers in China, and you employ book publishers in China to put the book together, and everything's in China, then the multiplier effect of this business, exactly. Heidi, ho.
Take it all.
Listen, fat. But you're really going to hollow out the economy, especially if you say to the CEOs, look, here in this country we're going to have really tough environmental laws, and we're going to have tough pension and employment laws. But if you manufacture the sub-assemblies and the bits and pieces over in China and India, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, they're not going to enforce any of the similar laws, and we'll just let the product back into this country. You can make it more cheaply, your profit margins widen. And it just was really a boneheaded approach. And we were fortunate as an economy that we had been rich for so long that we could take the body blows we did take under W and certainly under Obama. And now we're starting to see just how much we can reinvigorate this economy. There was a test case in this Kodak thing that Donald Trump, wisely, in my view, and I think your view and Larry Doyle's view, Donald Trump wisely said, we're not going to be hostage to China, particularly given the Wuhan virus, for all of our medicine. We can't let that happen. We got to bring that stuff back inside this country.
I first thought it was crazy that he did that with Kodak, but what people might not realize is they are a chemical company. Right. Film, that's a whole chemical thing. Right. And also, it's like an American iconic brand that's been in the toilet for about 20 years.
Yeah, I think it technically went bankrupt.
It did go bankrupt.
Back out of bankruptcy. The other thing I know, and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I know from my service on the board of a company called Ted Castles in Ireland, that was about the opposite of an environmentally friendly company. It was a coal distributor. That you take a city like Rochester, and you take the inner cities in the Northeast and the Midwest, and instead of doing all the bits and pieces of the generic drugs in some remote portion of India or China, you start making that stuff in downtown Rochester, in downtown Canton, Ohio.
Reinvigorate the whole place.
Yeah, exactly. The main company Kodak employs more people, and then the suppliers to Kodak locally, and then suddenly it's a lot more vibrant. The local businesses take off, the local stores, you name it.
Well, you've hit it on the head, Charles, obviously, but Rochester is decimated. It's like it was Bosch and Lomb and Kodak, and both. Yeah. I think Bosch and Lomb went to Mexico or something. Or
I mean, another one. I did a lot of work in Toledo, Ohio, hollowing out that city. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but well, no, I was a young punk, and you come along in an investment bank, and you got to bring in business. So my bosses said, "Look, why don't you go somewhere and try to bring in a piece of business?" So I looked down and I saw Champion Spark Plug Company seemed to be an interesting company. So I got an appointment, walked in the front door and said, "Look, I'm Charles Ortel from Dillon Reed, and I'd like to represent you in thinking differently about your business." And they said, "That's a good idea, we'll hire you." So it was a very unusual situation, and they did hire me and the firm, and we spent a number of years and concluded that it was a hopeless case, that it had to be sold. Wow. So we sold it to Cooper Tire and Rubber, or Cooper, I should say, Cooper Industries. And in that case, there had been so many decades. Is that Toledo there, or is that Rochester?
This is Rochester, Kodak headquarters, I guess. I mean, I've been there, but it was a long time ago. They were working.
I think it's over here, huh?
They were working on some kind of virtual reality device, so they had contacted me to come over there, and it was. The town was pretty economically depressed, and the office, if you walk into a company name the company, where you're like, wow, these guys have billions of dollars. Kodak, it looked like my public school or something. Yeah. The buildings were cinder block.
It's depressing. Yeah, I also looked I think it was in Rochester, I looked at buying Genesee Beer Company. I see there the Genesee River, and it's sad because Rochester in the 50s and 60s actually was thriving. Poughkeepsie, the same thing.
Right.
Many towns in New York have just been flattened by decades of Democrat and liberal Republican mismanagement.
Yeah.
So
I hope Kodak, you know what it reminded me of, Charles? Because also, I had Larry Nichols on yesterday, and he was describing the experience of kind of being totally unconscious for several months, and then imagine waking up, and this is the world. He's like, wait a minute. Have I died? And this is hell?
Right.
But it's almost like Back to the Future 2, where you land in the middle of the town, and it's like, what is going on? But I'm thinking, if you went forward to the future, there's that movie where Sylvester Stallone gets frozen, and when he comes back, Taco Bell is the fanciest restaurant. That's like Kodak will be the biggest pharmaceutical company in the future. Could be good.
Yeah, that's true. But it's... well, before we get our guest on, we should probably talk a little bit about why the Malice thing. And I think what we're seeing, we had a hearing yesterday where I think that the Democrats in the House of Representatives just took out multiple knives and did not cut enough out of Gerald Nadler's stomach to make a difference. I mean, they just committed harakiri on live TV time after time after time because, nobody everyone expects the Congress people in both parties to have legitimate oversight and also to craft legislation. That's what you want, and it's good to have legitimate oversight. But it is totally not cool to treat somebody like Barr, or a 70-year-old person, I guess, who doesn't need this job.
Right.
He didn't ask for this job. He's not a personal friend of Donald Trump. He's conducted himself, I think, forthrightly. But to set this up where, it started out in a car wreck, literally. I mean, right?
It's too bad he didn't take the train, because it was more of a train wreck.
He starts out, I'm sorry I'm late, I was in a car wreck. Now I'm going to crash my car into Congress. And then to set it up, with the idea that you're going to have these angry people give an impassioned 2 or 3 minute speech.
Ignorant, angry people.
And then ask a question. Yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And it's not a yes or no question that they're asking, and then Barr's trying to answer it, and then your time's expired. And it was
disgraceful.
It's really ironic, because I think about the pitch I remember in high school a long time ago about being a Democrat, and the only person in modern history who in my family who's run for politics was a Democrat. The idea was that Democrats were tolerant. They were liberal, they were open-minded, they were truth seekers, whereas the Republicans were the inflexible, intolerant, conservative preservers of the old way of doing things. These people got up there, and to a person, a man, woman, whatever, they just projected, we are the party of intolerance and ignorance.
Yeah.
Starting off with, Gerald Nader, listen fat himself, getting up there and saying, it's a myth that there are riots in Portland. I mean, it was sad, frankly, for them, because they're going to be able, the Republicans and Trump are going to be able to repackage these hearings, repackage these shots of the violence all over the country, and give you a very stark choice. And remember, in 2016, Donald Trump spent a fraction of what Hillary Clinton spent. The one difference is he actually campaigned,
right,
whereas Hillary didn't. And once again, history's repeating itself. Listen fat, Biden is, in theory, taking questions. You saw the recent press conference, only from pre-approved reporters.
Of course.
No hostile questions, only from...
There was something very funny said during the hearing. Something about, during the election, they were talking about something that was said about Roger Stone or whatever, and he was like, when Trump was losing to Hillary Clinton. It's like, excuse me, he won. There was no point where he was losing. You told people he was losing. That doesn't mean he's losing.
Well, I do remember actually that period, because it was right 2 or 3 weeks before the election. They tried to put out, the story across all media platforms. Fake news did it. It was a coordinated story. Hillary is a blue wall, unassailable. He made a good run. They're measuring the curtains for Hillary. There's going to be, you had your run. Get used to Madam Chairman, First Laddie, and all that kind of stuff. And they tried to sell it. And I knew it was bullshit, because I live in Gerald Nadler's district, actually, in the West Village. And in my area, there were very few Hillary Clinton signs right before the election, whereas in 2008, you couldn't walk down the street without, every building had Obama signs, and there was just no enthusiasm for Hillary. And I think people back in 2016 were either like me, unsure that Donald Trump could do in a public setting what he did in a private family-controlled business, where basically everybody worked for him, and everybody in the Trump organization understands that it's only the Trump kids who are going to take over the business. And that's the kind of environment where it's easy to get things done your way. It's not, as he found out in Washington, D.C., very different story. When you agree to do something and you think it's going to happen, and next thing you know, all the sharks who have been embedded since Bill Clinton time and before go out of their way to knife you in the back.
Yeah. It's a sad situation, Charles. There's the other thing that we need to talk about is, yesterday was comedy in Congress at William Barr's expense. And I think I've been pretty clear since he was appointed that I am not a fan of William Barr. I don't trust him. I think he is a deep state guy through and through. They even spoke about his career history at the CIA, etc. However, they had me rooting for him because, whatever. Me not liking the guy is irrelevant. with regard to how he should be treated in like a legal proceeding, which this sort of is. I mean, you can be held in contempt of Congress. I think the people who are in Congress, there should be a period where you go through some training or something, right?
You should have to take a test of basic economics. If you say that Marxism, more taxes and big government's the way to go when you got $23 trillion in debt, you should say, well, the people spoke, and you can come to Congress, but you're going to be working in the parking lot. You're not going to be doing any legislation or whatever.
Well, yeah, right. They could have had AOC making coffee for everybody.
Drinks.
But, I mean, what's his name, Nadler? Jim Jordan raised the valid point that they're asking him all these questions and they're not letting him in. They're like, boom, object. Shut up, Jim Jordan. And just carry on with the thing.
Well, the objective of that hearing was to give that asshole from Tennessee, Steve Cohen, an excuse to amp up his subcommittee to try to impeach Barr. That's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to get one statement under oath that they could say is a lie, and then they say, for that reason, we now have to start proceedings and have the mainstream spin all that. One thing I do want to talk about is a positive thing before our guest comes on. The biggest bombshell revelation at the time, I noticed it, and I think now the press is making a big deal about it, is the reveal by Barr, or revelation by Barr, that there is, in fact, an uppercase investigation that goes way back to 2009. Conservative Treehouse and others are already writing about this, the degree to which the Obama administration used private contractors to spy on Democrats, on people in the House and the Senate, on Republicans. It all went all the way back.
You and me?
Probably,
Yeah.
Certainly me, I think. I back.
There was one living here.
Right. But I was the first person, not to brag or anything, but I was the first person on television. I called for Timothy Geithner to be fired on CNBC 30 days after he was in office. I was the first person to say that Obama was waging a war on capitalism from London.
Is he the bald, sweaty? No, that's Hank Paulson. Who was Timothy Geithner?
He was the one who was president of the Federal Reserve of New York, then Treasury Secretary. But and I also called bullshit on the whole BP oil spill live. And many times I went after Obama. Not that he probably cared too much about me, but the point is, when you go into this history, as I have done, you've done, others have done, people are really starting to look at what would animate Comey and Brennan and Obama and Clinton to do what they did in 15 and 16. Why would they work so hard to rig the Democratic primary and rig the election, and then when they lost, to fight Trump for so long? They're not doing this because they're upset, they're sore losers. They're doing this because they're terrified.
Yeah, they're going to go to jail for the rest of their life.
For treason. And that this issue dates back to June of 2008, when the secret deal was made between the wife of the billionaires who employed Chinese spies, Dianne Feinstein, and in her mansion in Washington, D.C., right before the Bilderberg Conference, between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, to smoke a peace pipe or whatever they like to smoke, and march together to get Obama across the line and then run the White House and run the executive branch on a basis where nobody would investigate the Clintons and where the Obamas would have a chance to do exactly what the Clintons did after Barack and Michelle left the White House. There's some sort of a deal along those lines. There's a wider deal having to do with Iran. Valerie Jarrett, of course, was born in Iran and has deep ties to Iran. And I understand well the argument that why are we in the Middle East all tied in with the Sunni monarchs? Why shouldn't we be closer to the Iranian people after all their civilization? There are all these arguments. And the answer is that's all great if you didn't have the mullahs, if you didn't have the thugs running the country. Maybe it would make sense to try to do something in Iran. But the corruption here, the use of government assets to spy on U.S. citizens for corrupt personal gain, for corrupt political gain, and then to run roughshod over the Constitution with the Tea Party episode and using the IRS to target your opponents is just outrageous. And these supposedly intelligent genius Democrats should get the fact that this precedent that it has been set by Obama and is not yet corrected is a precedent. When Donald Trump gets his 7th term as president, I'm joking now, of course, but when Donald Trump, let's say, gets reelected, and then either you have a hiatus afterwards, you'll have a Democrat maybe, or you'll have another Trump relative, and then you can have another.
I don't want that.
I'm just saying you could have a scenario where the people the Democrats don't want to see in power are able to use the Obama-Clinton precedent to wreak havoc against Democrats. I mean, for their own safety, their own self-preservation.
They can't stand.
They shouldn't want this. And again, I've got to believe, and I do know just through life, and you get older and your friends get older and some of them get to be powerful. I know some powerful Democrats, and I've been told by some of them, oh, the Clintons are ancient history. Nobody cares about the Clintons. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Look, excuse me, I take that knife out of your back so that you...
Right. Yeah. Now, the other thing that we should discuss in the 5 minutes before Ken LaCorte joins us is that he has been very vocal in the whole big tech censorship issue. I was watching it's just been like several days of congressional testimony. It was exciting for me to see that even with the biggest titans of technology, U.S. government, and Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, they can't get the lip sync right on their stupid podcast coming from Congress. So I hope people appreciate how difficult it is to have these kind of video conference guests and deliver a high quality presentation. But this is about big tech monopolies and antitrust. Did you get a chance to see much of this? It's still ongoing live right now.
I didn't, but I think that this needs to be a priority. I know in my own personal experience, for example, in trying to set up this interview today, I got an email from the person I think who works with Ken, and I wanted to respond to it. And Google Mail was it took forever for me to hit reply, and they'd say, well, if you type now, it's going to cancel the email. You're going to because it hasn't downloaded properly, and and it just went, the thing spun around, and then I'll send the guy who contacted me a separate email, and I'm seeing all the tricks that could be used against somebody
they control your whole computer. Well, I mean, I'm using Apple, but you're using Chromebook, so it's these four guys do basically control everything with tech there.
Right, and a decision made, several days before or a week before the election, for the benefit of Joe Biden. Remember to vote, Joe, on November 6th. It's November 3rd.
What's November? Yeah,
it's November. It's November 3rd. But Joe, make sure you get out there and vote on the 6th. A decision made right before the 3rd to just say take down Crowdsource the Truth, or take down all the work that I've done since 2015 against the Clinton Foundation. Then we start complaining about it, and a lot of people make he doesn't have a mind to make up at the last minute, but a lot of people make their minds up at the last minute. And these people could throw a googly at us, a wobbly or whatever you call it. They could really influence the election results on November 3rd. And I hope that the Justice Department and others are really doing what should be done to try to come closer to a level playing field.
Yeah, I hope that they are. So let's try giving Ken a call right now. Hopefully he's ready to join us here. Just got to get a couple things ready to go. And with luck, we will hopefully have a better presentation than Congress had, because I don't think they know what they're doing too much. That's my opinion. Congress, yeah, they're sort of, interesting group over there. But this is Ken LaCorte, who's going to be joining us.
Hello, Ken. Indeed.
Can you hear us? Oh, Charles has got to put his headphones in. Hang on just 1 second there, Ken. And we're live right now. We're going to be bringing you on. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Glad to be here. Hey, let me just make sure this is the right mic. Are you hearing the breath?
Yep. Yes. We've got you loud and clear. Welcome to Charles Ortel is Closing In.
Terrific. Thank you.
Hey, Ken.
How are you?
Great, and delighted to meet you on air.
Nice meeting you. They keeping that light behind you?
That's not going to air. That's just your view of Charles, and we've got different cameras on Charles. But you were formerly a Fox bigwig, and now you are a LaCorte News smallwig. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. I actually would prefer if you lead me into the new network we launched. It's the Media Action Network. That's a
Oh,
little bit
sure.
better than the new site. Basically, we've created a right wing kind of version of Media Matters. That's tired of just bitching about the left wing media. That is actually trying to accomplish things and bring some balance back. Continue to expose, protect some of their victims and build up an alternative. So Media Action Network would be the best way to do it. Yeah, I ran FoxNews.com for about 10 years, and I was there for just under 20.
Wow. So on Media Matters, not your network, but Media Matters, I got involved going on Fox, focusing on the Clinton Foundation and how charities are used illegally for corrupt purposes. And I've reported Media Matters. Media Matters is a diabolically corrupt charity.
You probably did that. We took a big push about, I'd say 7 or 8 years ago. Was that about when you first, and a lot of people were out looking at their 501c3, looking at a lot of things like that in the Times. They went out and they made an announcement. They said, okay, we're not going to just keep talking about Fox. We're going to sponsor lawsuits. We're going to take them down. We're going to beat them up. We're going to run investigations on their executives and all that. And I kind of led an internal campaign to help deal with Media Matters a little bit. And we recruited a lot of guys same time around then. So I don't know if that was your era where you were involved.
I started in 2015 and 16. In fact, on March 9th, I think it was, 2016, I wrote a piece in Breitbart with so many red flags. Why isn't the IRS auditing the Clinton Foundation? And
right.
It was at 15, rather. Mm-hmm. And you guys picked it up and featured it, and it got a lot of attention. And after that, I went after Media Matters and a lot of other charities.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they were literally a 501c3 saying that they were going to, to do a lot of things that 501c3 shouldn't do.
Exactly.
But nobody cared.
Well, we'll see about that.
Nobody in the government cared.
Yeah, we'll see about that, because what we've done is we've got a large team of people around the world who've been basically instigating investigations of the donors and of the charities themselves. And we all need money now. Most governments are in deficit, got too much debt. A nice way to clean up and accomplish what you're trying to do is go against these corrupt charities, including the Harvards and the Yales.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point.
So tell us a little bit about your aims of your organization.
So basically, we've divided it into kind of three chunks. One is to expose, just continue. I mean, look, the media, as you know, has gone from being biased to gone from just being 100% for their team red, team blue. And unfortunately for conservatives over that time, 90% of them are going blue and 10% of them go red. But I mean, look at what CNN and Fox was just 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They were biased, but they weren't just out and out beating the drums for this. So one is just to continue, because a lot of people still that those guys are the referee and not players, and that's not the case. So that's a big part of what we do. A second part is literally we need to keep calling out to protecting the victims of media and social media to an extent. And that means everything from, getting a gal who they almost kicked out of school because she did a TikTok that said she was conservative and they weren't going to turn her liberal. Or another one got bounced off of her, the girl in the lower right on that corner now. She got bounced off of her school newspaper because she wrote a fine, good piece backed up with facts debunking systemic racism in law enforcement. A lot of it is doing what we can and yelping about the and this is going to be a big long-term one, the increasing, and what we're going to talk about, I think, I'm good with talking about anything media related, the increasing censorship on the in the social media. That's just, they went from Alex Jones to a couple far crazy guys, and now it's like, oh, you don't agree with the mainstream thinking, we're banning you. And then our long-term aim is to bring more balance in. I don't think we're going to go back in your and my lifetimes. We're not going to go back to the to the media that's really trying to be fair and balanced in the same article. I think the best we probably have is to have people understand that it's a partisan press and that we've got, some on both sides, and that conservatives have more than one TV network and AM radio and some online sites. Especially online, the fight's going to be hard. So my goal is to, when I retire, to have it be closer to 50-50, and at least people can get their information and kind of understand what's going on. So that's the long version.
Yeah, what we found in the work we've done together since June of 2017 is there actually is quite an appetite for people, this kind of discussion where you're not interrupted by ads every 6 minutes or thereabouts for ridiculous concepts or products. For people who want to do the deep dive and really understand, the issues and the components, that's generally what we do. Wednesday we do an interview show like we're doing now, but Sunday we do deep dives into subject matter, and we give people a chance to see the evidence for themselves.
I think one of the few bright spots in the media right now is long format video. You look at a Joe Rogan who is, blowing the doors off of everybody there, and his average show is 2.5, 3 hours. Mm-hmm. Now, people don't watch all of that, but it's smarter. You're able to go things beyond that, but try to get some nuance in the online world outside of that. It's hard. Reason doesn't go viral. Only nastiness and extreme goes viral in the Facebook, Twitter world, and those systems are designed for that. But you're right, 100%. Long form video, I think, is to me the only real bright spot. Excuse me, in the media world over the past 5 years.
Well, Ken, one of the things that's stopping things from going viral is exactly what Congress is questioning four of the biggest tech titans about as we speak right now. You've got a piece right here on the Media Action Network website about one of the most intriguing things to happen recently, these doctors who came forward with sensible, reasoned, personal experience with their patients that could have real implications for this coronavirus outbreak, and the tech companies are doing everything they can to prevent people from seeing that.
Yeah, we're headed down a bad path with that. We're headed down a bad path because it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Whomever wins in November, unless Trump does, and he really takes this seriously and looks at Section 230 and looks at changing some copyright laws if they can at an executive level. I know they talked about it, but we'll see what they can do. But no, it's more questions today in Congress are going to be, how dare you let people talk, than how dare you not. And to me, the even scarier story that happened today was Breitbart, and really finally somebody pulled some numbers to show that somebody even bigger and scarier than Twitter, Google, was putting a heavy thumb on the scale, and that's bad. That's bad.
Yeah.
We're going to be behind that. We're going to be behind the curve on this for a while.
Yeah. Well, of course, we had Joel Pollak on recently. He's a great guy.
Yeah. And this did come up during the testimony. Killed stories about Joe Biden on the search. I mean, this is obvious to most people, but yet the people in Congress seem to deny and doubt that this was happening.
This was the best that I've seen that Google was screwing around with their primary algorithm. They did a lot of stuff with autocomplete. They did a lot of things here and there. But this was the first, and look, you got people accusing everybody of everything, right? It's like, my tweet didn't go big, it must be Twitter. I mean, you never kind of know who to believe on that. This was the first and best evidence I've seen of thumb on the scale, human putting it in and changing that around on the Google thing.
Yeah.
And it's on this one, it's very easy. You just type in Joe Biden into any other search engine. Literally, you type in Joe Biden and Breitbart won't come up in the top 100 hits. You could even copy and paste some of their absolute headlines, which if you've ever searched on Google before, when you have it word for word, and they still wouldn't appear in the top 20 or 30 of it. So there is definitely a thumb down algo going.
You get a lot of Joe Biden websites showing up in that search, of course.
Everything else. Yeah.
And of course, one of the things that I don't understand, you being an alumnus of Fox, I don't understand why the Fox team, the top team, is continuing to sell these absurd poll results, national polls, a registered voter showing Biden ahead. I don't get that.
Look, Fox doesn't. When I worked at Fox doesn't look at themselves as political players. I know everybody in the world thinks they do, but they don't. They're not like, hey, we're here to help out the president. Those conversations rarely, if ever, happen to me. It was journalists trying to be journalism. They care more about beating CNN than they care more about Donald Trump beating his thing. So what do they have? They have a polling results. And let's be frank, it's getting the same poll results as almost everyone else, with the possible exception of Rasmussen. And Rasmussen has them underwater too. So, something's going on out in the real world. I actually, whether it's everybody lying to pollsters, whether it's real. Look, and I know a lot of conservatives right now who they haven't focused on the final race, and a lot of them are not thrilled with the president, that he wasn't tough enough on the one guys, or that, for whatever reasons. So I don't think they're all that far off, probably. And Fox doesn't view themselves as partisans. They view themselves as journalists.
No,
so what are you going to do?
I'm just
well,
saying.
I mean, they've had for years two polling companies that work together, that have the systems. What do you tell your pollsters? Hey, change it around to make Trump look good?
No, it's not that. It's not that. What I would say is that the big swing, let's say from 2012 to the present, is what percentage are independent, what percentage are conservative Republican and liberal Republican, what are moderate Democrat and progressive Democrat. And filling those percentage in it is one key thing. Then also having likely versus registered, likely to vote voters versus registered. I just don't think the buckets they're using are correct. I think the estimates are wrong.
I mean, that first one is a fair thing, and who knows on that. I mean, it's, there's always a little bit of spin on those to know, are we really tracking people the best? If I recall, there was a certain date when we were there before that we went from registered to likely. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they're still doing the same thing. What they have to be doing is maintaining their same standards, though.
Right.
That would make them probably get smacked worse than anything.
And how do you feel about One American News Network?
I want them to succeed. I don't want Fox to be the only player in town. I want them to I want these other guys, but I watch OAN and I just, they're not smart enough. It's kind of like watching a kid who's 7 years old and he's trying to shave like his dad. I mean, they try to mimic Fox too much. They go with the big anchor sets. I mean, I trust, and it's just like I see them. They are so afraid there of ever being seen as not conservative. So they have so sometimes I find themselves saying things that I don't buy. Mm-hmm. So, I look at somebody like he's back and forth on Trump, a Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro to me has 3 times as much credibility as CNN, Fox, or, outside of individual people. Or there's a lot of guys out there. Tim Pool is an interesting one. I mean, there's a lot of people there. So I want OAN to succeed. I just think that they need to invest more into some smart people who understand the nuances of what they're talking about. And B, don't be afraid to, if you're going to be 100% on Trump's side 100% of the time, you're going to say stupid stuff, because Trump says stupid stuff. I mean, look, I'm going to vote for him, and if I could vote for him 4 times, I would. But he says something stupid almost every day. I mean, he often just talks, then thinks. That's just his shtick, right? And if you're trying to back up every single thing he said, well, you're going to look like an idiot.
So you've had the unique experience, Ken. You've been in big media, obviously on Fox. You're doing sort of your own independent sort of stuff now. I think, is it Bell and Howell? It looks like you've got an 8mm or a 16mm camera behind you, so I presume you've been a filmmaker for some time.
Oh, that's just set dressing that we found from an antique sale.
Got it. Well, so how's your experience been transitioning from big media to independent media as you are now?
The biggest difference right now wasn't the big versus small. It's over the past 3-4 years that the media's gone insane. That it went from, again, you could go to CNN in the months before Donald Trump was candidate, or let's just say a year before. That's not all that long time, right? That's 5 years, 4 years. And you would get a pretty good idea. Yeah, okay, they put a spin on it. Now it's the equivalent of programmed by the DNC.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that is just really hounded us and hounded me is the cancel culture. I literally had the New York Times do a crazy hit piece on me that you wouldn't even recognize as reality just because it was so intellectually dishonest. It was as dishonest as if Fox did a story saying, Pete Buttigieg gave a campaign speech yesterday wearing underwear and socks. Just didn't mention that he was wearing a suit and tie and shoes and all of that stuff. I mean, they've gone to that. I mean, yeah, from the photo down, literally, like, because I had a pro-democratic side on my Facebook stuff, they considered that tactics was the most crazy thing I saw. But we had 3 million followers on Facebook. Before this story came out, it was them going to Facebook with patently false information. Facebook killed me. Never even been able to get a meeting. So wow. I was pulling in 2 million people a month off of those Facebook pages, and it went to zero.
Wow.
So I never experienced that before with Fox or in the media. That to me is the biggest change is the, if we can't beat you or if we just don't like you, let's silence you. That's hard especially for a small guy. So I'm starting this new thing, realizing that I'm going to get killed off of Twitter. I'm going to get, I have to look at all of those now as short term, maybe with the exception of Parler, because that's their shtick. And that makes it harder to thrive in a world. Yeah, no, sir.
Yeah, no, I mean, something like Parler is interesting, but I mean, it's so difficult for anything like that to get any traction because all the eyeballs are on Twitter and they have so much money in order to even build the infrastructure. I mean, I've tried Parler and frankly, it's a vastly inferior product in addition to having far fewer people looking at it. I was on there, I've been on it for about 2 years. And what happened was it somehow logged me out. And in trying to log back in, it's like, oh, we'll send you a text message to recover your password. I never get the text message and they don't respond to tech support. So I've just forgotten about it.
Yeah, so I can tell you with whatever happened with tweets and whatnot, they increased by about 60% in the past month or two, which I'm sure made their login even tougher to do. Yeah. Being able to affect a human there. I mean, they went from like 500,000 to I forget. I don't want to give the hard numbers. And there's actually kind of enough oomph there going on. I mean, you've now got pro-Trump sites that are over 100,000. You've got some. It's starting to catch fire, certainly more than any other alternative has. The trickiest part is when you start up as a free speech platform, you really get a bunch of a-holes starting off. You get everybody. If you just got everybody who was kicked off of Twitter. Okay, there's a lot of conservatives there, but there's also some like real Nazis and real just bad people. And that was the Gab problem. Was you went into Gab and you're like, I'm pro free speech, but you guys are a little psycho. Parler has overcome that. They smartly pulled some mainstream right players early on in that, Epoch Times and some of the others in that world.
Yeah, but I mean, sorry, real quick. With regard to the whole tech thing that's going on today, what you're describing is one part of it. We've got to get the audience there. The other problem is, when like with video, for instance, we've got YouTube, and then almost every single video serving company that has come up to try to compete, they're so powerful, and the product that they offer to viewers for no money is so good that creating something competitive that can even be remotely useful or close becomes virtually impossible. I'm right now being faced with such a huge increase for my Vimeo bill that I've got to think about how to deal with that. And it's got to do with how Google just controls that space.
These are not 6 month. These are not 6 month fights. This is a 6-year fight.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, we need to build up a complete right infrastructure for online guys. And the last step of that will be probably the social guys, although, cross your fingers on Parler. That's why I'm just talking it up, even though I have more fun going to Twitter. It's like we as conservatives have to help these out. I used to trash OAN but it's like now I trash them out of love and tell people fix it, watch it, get there, they'll get better. Because a world with one Fox News that whichever Murdoch of the day controls it all, that's not as comfortable as a world with Fox News and two minor players, and that they've got to worry about their right flank, that they've got to say, okay, we're not the only game in town. But on the internet side, man, it's payment systems, because they love yanking these doctors. Last I checked, they were yanked off their website. It's ISPs, it's server farms, it's ad networks, it is distributed network. What do you call those? Not virtual private servers, but where you
decentralized.
What do you call it when you have all the servers all over the world? But anyhow, the whole back end of the internet is a bunch of liberal pussies, and they love yanking out conservatives. And they're 10 years. Look, I was even looking at Color of Change and some of these others. I mean, what you're looking at on the right with where we built in our own petition thing and we've built in kind of campaigns. We're going really an email driven thing, because I think I have a year before they start saying we're going to stop hate email from coming your way, and then I'll be declared hate just because that's how they play that game. But the left. Silicon Valley was created in Silicon Valley, and it's 95-5 liberal. And when you look at the tools that Democratic activists have versus Republican activists, they're a decade behind. It's not funny. It's like, wow, I look at a massive CMS things that they built that they allow people to track, back end type of things that they allow people to track users and see how they sign petitions and get them on phone calls. I can go to Color of Change and they dial their 800 number and they will immediately patch me into whatever city council is thinking of cutting police that day. And I can talk live to that. I can make my own videos and give it. I mean, it's like this stuff, the Trump campaign has helped a little bit, but this stuff has been, Color of Change has been going on since 2005. And it's the perfect example of like the media liberal complex, founded by crazy communist activist Van Jones. Starts this. He goes to the White House. Color of Change was the one that really helped get Glenn Beck off the air, because they started the He Doesn't Like Black People boycott. Their founder is in the White House, and now he's got a show on CNN. Wow. This is the liberal media complex at work.
And even with all that tech, they think that Charles is Charisse.
Yeah, that's right. I get, I'm not politically active per se, but I get inundated every day with emails. Today I got one from James Taylor, Valerie Jarrett, separate emails, all addressed to Dear Charisse, CHRARISSE, join the fight. Nuts.
That's funny. When I do my stuff, if you put a plus sign, so like if you're Jim at Gmail, if you go Jim and put a plus sign in your and then put some characters after that all comes to the same box. So now when I go sign up to guys like this, I put Ken plus coc@gmail.com. So then from then on, I used to do this in the old days of seeing who was selling my addresses to direct mail guys. I'd put a false name on coming to my house or spell it differently. And you can kind of do that. Somebody signed you up, or you signed up to something, or something happened there. And it's in that system.
But along these lines, have you been following what's going on with Thousand Currents and Act Blue and the Tides Foundation?
To a small extent. It's like I know that there is likely corruptions there. Act Blue was another brilliant back end thing that is funding small Dems and all over. I think there's now finally one Republican one that is trying to be that. Right. Look, it takes a lot to set up a campaign to do all that shit. And these guys would literally come in and say it's a turnkey operation. We take X percent and let's go. But I think most of these foundations are corrupt. I just want to see. I would love to see your writings turn into indictments.
Yeah.
Well,
sure.
Did you happen to see the testimony of Larry Doyle and John Moynihan, December 2018, before Mark Meadows?
No, I didn't.
It's really worth watching. These are the guys. Their website or their Twitter handle is LW Doyle USA. financial bounty hunters, and they are dogged. But, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Who are these guys?
If you could mail that to me, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll
absolutely. Do. So I know you've only got limited time with us today.
Yeah, I've got a call coming in at 18 after the hour. So whatever we want to do.
Oh, so yeah. Well, what else did you want to cover? I know you've got a lot of stuff that you're doing.
You know what? I'm good to talk Google. I'm good to talk or Twitter. I'm good to talk. Look, my best thing is to talk about the media somehow and how conservatives need to stop bitching about it and get in that fight. And there's not a day that goes by that there's not a fight where we're either winning or losing. We won Goya, but
that was great.
But and that was another one that 2 tweets and the media did their dutiful job and jumped on that. AOC and who was the guy who ran for president for 15 minutes? Julian Castro tweeted this. That was enough to get that boycott going on CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, and Washington Post, because that's how the system works.
Yeah. I'm not really trained in media, but I've been in it now since 2007 or 8, doing appearances. And you brought up Russia and the accusations against you in Russia. You brought up CNN. I want to give you a quick little vignette and get your reaction. In 2016, CNN contacted me and said, "We see all your stuff on the Clinton Foundation. Why are you so upset about it?" A long process ensued. I go in to see Jake Tapper in Washington, D.C. to be filmed and for a 30-minute interview or something like that. They were going to cut it up. And at the beginning, the producer says to me, we sent all your questions to the Clinton Foundation, and we just want you to know that the Clinton Foundation told us that you had asked these questions of them and that you were happy with the Clinton Foundation's answers. This is what the producer said.
Right.
And I looked at her and I said, that's not how I roll. I'm not that type of a journalist. I just look in the public domain. I did not contact the Clinton Foundation. I have never spoken to them or anybody else. And she was dumbfounded. So then I go into the interview, late May, early June 2016, a pivotal moment, if you think about the dynamics of that race. Tapper asked me all these questions. He all high and mighty. I've got Mitch McConnell in 10 minutes. You're going to have to be quick. I don't have much time for you. 45 minutes later, we're going through all this stuff, the real problems at the Clinton Foundation. They spike it. They never showed 1 second of it. And in contrast, I started getting asked to go on international media, Russian media, all kinds of media. And never once across many media platforms would they say, what are you going to say in advance? Really controversial stuff. They would give you an open platform right after Putin said X, Y, and Z. What do you think, Charles, of what he just said? And to see CNN turn into what I imagine Russian media was like under the communists, and then have this experience with the Russia, it's crazy.
Like I trust an RT piece more than I trust a CNN piece.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To be, look, they don't lie. They just leave out salient facts. Just like in my Buttigieg example. Right. That's the way the game is played. And I think I think every liberal media guy in America believes that he's living in 1933 Germany, and he is the thing that is standing between Trump, Hitler, and America. And so pesky things like giving the other side their due, like saying I'm at a riot as opposed to I'm at a peaceful protest while shit's burning right behind you.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like there are moments. I mean, the ABC tweet today talked about that a peaceful protest intensified. Right. and resulted in a courthouse on fire and blah 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 blah. It's like they're not even trying to not be propaganda these days.
Along the lines, I don't know if you run into the opinion writers at Sputnik, but I've encountered somebody named Katrina Blanova, and she and I have done over 100 pieces where she asks me questions in print and I respond. And she asks other people, and it's, to me, old-style journalism. I mean, it's both sides, it's balanced, it's in-depth, goes all over the world. And I find them to be far more professional than...
Because you're a Russian tool.
No, I'm not. Not in the slightest. I'm an American tool.
When you were 20 years old, do you ever think you'd live in a time where Democrats hated the Russians more than the Republicans?
Yeah.
All right, well, we better start. If we're gonna, what's your timing? What's our thinking?
Well, however long you've got, if you need to.
As I said, I'm good, but I've got another call coming in at 8.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up real quick. Let me just ask you one last thing, because, Fox News, obviously, News Corp owns the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, etc. There's been some strange reporting in some of these things, and I think it's really just not in the interest of true journalism when we've got this kind of consolidation of media. The New York Post particularly has had a lot of very strange reporting about Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. They make a big deal about reporting on stuff in In-N-Out Burger, and they don't seem to correct it. I don't know. I mean, you've been out of Fox for a while, but was there any favoritism towards particular people or avoiding stories kind of going on?
Anyhow, I got till at least 20 after, or 18 after. Look, I don't know a whole lot about the New York Post, as far as at least their management, and they were in the same building. I mean, I can tell you at when I was at Fox, and again, I was in meetings twice a day with Roger Ailes and whatnot. He definitely saw the world in a different way and wanted us to talk about that. And but it was never. Well, I shouldn't say never. There were once or twice where I got a call from the muckety, the even muckety or muckety muck saying, this person knows a Murdoch and blah, 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 blah. Happened a couple times. A couple times over 20 years wasn't enough for me to quit my job on and run away and say that. If it happened all the time, I'd be like, I'd have a problem with that. There were certainly, but you also kind of knew which way the winds were blowing. I mean, when Murdoch was marrying a Chinese gal and spending hundreds of millions of dollars in China, do you think that it's like, hey, let's do an investigative piece on how much China sucks. It's like nobody said not to do it, but you made you scratch your head a little bit. And look, I mean, we also knew that our base was conservative as opposed to a liberal base. So there was always a little bit of, who your audience is and whatnot. Look, I don't know if I'm concerned about the consolidation of media. I certainly I am on the online side because I mean, look at Milo Yiannopoulos. He was a conservative, outspoken, flamboyant, gay young guy who would say things to get attention. But he was also, if you heard him talking about politics and talking about the philosophy behind it, was very, very smart and in kind of an English way. He could talk through. He understood the values and the philosophy that was underpinning what he believed. But he'd also say things like feminism is cancer, and that drove people. When they silenced him, that's the scary thing. They pulled his money sources away because literally they got banks to stop because there's Stripe and there's a number of payment processors that ran away. He couldn't do a GoFundMe. They pulled him off of YouTube, off of Facebook and Twitter. Well, that made him disappear. Yeah. That bothers me a heck of a lot more than NBC owns Univision and all the legacy media we'll bitch about, but they're not going to exist in the same way in 10 years. The future of political communication in America is on the computer, and they now act in concert enough to kill people electronically that they can make them disappear. Some again, who's Alex Jones, literally a Facebook executive gave an interview and said you couldn't even. If you're reporting on him, if you said complimentary things, they would take down your stuff. If you said something critical of him, you could say that on Facebook.
That's crazy.
It's like, wow, how do you do that as a journalist? How do you, and this is what we've seen in yesterday's thing. Breitbart News was covering a news conference in Washington, D.C. of doctors. Twitter and Facebook and YouTube decides they don't like what they see and that's in violation of today's WHO standards. So we're yanking that down, and all that stuff disappeared. Well, the whistleblower, nobody in America knows his name. I got pulled off of Facebook, not Twitter on that one, weirdly enough. I got pulled off of Facebook. Google took ads off my page that mentioned his name, and my YouTube videos were yanked down because I mentioned the name of a man who started the impeachment of a U.S. president.
It's amazing.
That's RT time, right?
Yeah. Well, on WHO, we spent a lot of time on our various videos talking about the corruption at the World Health Organization involving Tedros, the leader, but even going way back. I don't know how much you know about the HIV/AIDS global fund that started in January 2002 on a false premise. I mean, yes, right. HIV and AIDS is a threat, but the real threat is that the cost of those drugs remains incredibly high in countries like the United States, where our insurance people can pay for these high costs. And the pharmaceutical companies have made big money off that. The drugs distributed in Ethiopia and whatever else, nobody knows what really happened to them. And they're trying the same damn thing all over again with this COVID.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it gets complicated when you say, okay, a drug cost X million dollars to get to market because of FDA regulations, and therefore we're giving you X years in price protections before it goes to a certain thing. And so it gets a little too complicated for my simple understandings. I used to work in that industry for a little bit. And you can't charge the same amount in Pittsburgh that you charge in some African country, because then you get zero sales there. But it does present and create very weird things, and it's rent seeking at a certain point. Look, I'm a big believer that the big tech guys are, they are cruising under the umbrella, and if it wasn't for United States copyright and other types of protective laws, they wouldn't have the monopolies that they have. So I don't, there's a government hand in the monopolies and create. I mean, look, the concept that you can write something on Facebook and post a picture of your kids. Facebook has no legal liability of that. So if you slander me, not our deal. That's your deal, and we got nothing to do with it. We're just a pipeline. On the other hand, but if I make Ken's book over here and try to grab your post and grab what you said and put it up on my site, I don't get sued by you. I get sued by Facebook because you gave them worldwide exclusive use of that, of your thoughts and writings and images and video. And so on one hand, they say, well, you can't, because that's why they're monopolies, right? They're not monopolies necessarily because they're so great. They're monopolies because every single friend of mine has his pictures in Facebook, and I can't see my niece's birthday party since Facebook yanked me down. That's why they're monopolies, and nobody can use that information that you didn't really aggressively or actively, you signed a 29-page document that you clicked on when you said, hey, I want Facebook. But the concept that you said, give worldwide exclusive rights of this picture to Facebook, but prevent Parler from having it. Nobody really thought that. And if the government said, okay, you have to do it on an individual basis to say, I only give this copyright law to Facebook as opposed to anybody else, or you could click off and saying, it's out in the public domain. I'm good with that. There would be a Facebook competitor tomorrow that would have all your friends, that you'd have login information, that it would be good and ready to go, and Facebook would be a third of their size in 5 years.
Which would be a good thing.
Which would be a good thing. But look, we got a lot of half of the politicians in America right now say, they don't censor enough. I mean, those guys are in front of Congress, but they're in front of Congress. They're not in front of the Senate. So they're in front of Democrats who are going to ask most of the questions of, how could you let Trump say this? How could you allow this kind of hate speech? How could you, not that guy, but most of the other guys. So it's like, there's going to be some people saying conservatives aren't being treated fairly. But most of it is Dems saying, why aren't you censoring more online? They don't call it that, but that's exactly what they're saying.
I know we've got just a few minutes left. Are you prepared to give us a sense of how you see the election panning out? Do you see us switching to mail-in voting only? Do you see a third wave coming?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. I don't know how the election will turn out. I still kind of have a hunch that Trump is going to take this somewhat handily, even though that defies what my logic and any belief in the polling system goes. I don't think that most Americans, I think right now in Americans' heads, it's not a Trump versus Biden campaign. It's a Trump versus Trump campaign. Mm-hmm. And in a Trump versus Trump campaign, he can lose. It's in other words, people haven't really visualized, okay, one of these two guys is going to become president of the United States. And I think that right now, a lot of people are mad at Trump. I'm mad at him for saying some stupid things on COVID, for following along and for keeping the country closed down too long, for letting all these I look at that courthouse up in Portland, and all I can think of is, I don't care if you have to put 1,000 people there, paint it. It looks like a crap hole in Guatemala, right? Paint it. Get those guys back and take over. This is America, and put up some of those statues while you're at it too. So I got some problems with Trump. Yeah, that courthouse. Yeah, that third one from the right. It's like, so they pulled off those people. But look at this. Guatemala looks better than this.
Well, the technical term is shitholi.
Shitholi. So it's like, look, I'm upset with them for something. Now, doesn't mean I'm going to vote for. Doesn't mean I'm going to go vote for Joe Biden, who. The first thing he did when the church went on fire in Washington D.C. was jump on his knees in front of a bunch of black people standing behind him, not jointly in prayer, but with them backing behind him, them all standing, and him in his subservient pose on his knee. To me, that's the Michael Dukakis picture of this election. Is not that one, but the one where literally the same day that people were bitching that Trump was holding up a Bible in front of a church, right. Joe Biden was in a church. Stage press thing on his knees, looking up at the camera in, it's not that upper right. It was in, the lower third. Go down 3 on the very far left. Yeah, that one. And them standing behind and him saying, "I'm here to serve. I kneel before Zod."
Right.
You show that.
That's what I was thinking about. Superman 2. Good call. Because that's what he made the president do in the movie. It's got a lot of symbolism, doesn't it, Ken? When the most powerful man kneels before this guy from space, that was the symbol that they'd taken over.
And Zod was smart enough, because when he landed, he said, "Who's the president?" And some mealy mouth guy said, "I am." And he said, "Go, okay, kneel." And the guy went and kneel. It's like, this guy couldn't be your president. No leader of men would be that subservient. And then the other actor comes out and it's like, "All right, it's me. I'll kneel to save humanity, but I still think you're a jerk." So, but this was clearly the first guy. No, you're right. There's a reason why they said "kneel before me" as a symbol of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen this film about 7,000 times when VHS was invented, so I know exactly where you're coming from. Being 10 and watching this on video is like, that's all you need. Well, Ken,
I'm a huge believer, though, that conservatives need to pick their upstream battles better, because they don't. And that liberals have done a tremendous job of owning the things that are upstream information that turn into campaigns. It's like, yeah, it's important who wins the next election. But had they not taken over completely the education system, the higher education system in America, had they not completely taken over the entertainment system in America, had they now not even taken over the ESPNs and the sport people, you decide to watch football this year, you're going to be getting an ad for liberalism and nihilism, for many hours. They've taken over, the reporting in the media of that. And if conservatives don't start looking upstream, getting conservatives on and taking the fight right to college campuses, where we're the ones that often pay the bills, getting conservative movies in there and watching those and telling their kids, "Yeah, I know you actually believe in God, but go ahead and be a producer in Hollywood anyhow and just shut up about it," and taking back the news media, we're not going to win too many future elections, because they've done it in a brilliant way. The only kind of conservative mantras, upstream things that conservatives ran or had their values there were education, which has taken it. I'm sorry, religion, which organized religion has taken it on the ear in this country, and places like the Boy Scouts that have now been defunded because the left helped destroy them by allowing people who'd been molested 20 years ago to sue them, but not a public teacher. These things aren't accidents. These the fact that we have crazy crap happening in the streets is a result of the media lying about it and education putting their heads in a different place to hate this country.
I'll give you a positive, maybe closing thought. I think in 2016, I didn't vote, actually, in part because I wanted to maintain my neutrality, and I live here in Manhattanistan, and it doesn't really matter. But I had reservations about Trump because he had no political experience. You could say his business was sort of political. But now here's a guy who's had a hurricane and everything thrown at him. He's gotten a lot accomplished. He has gravitas. And Joe, I'm sorry, does not. It's mobs versus jobs, baby. It's that simple. And I think people may not admit it in the polling, but as we sit right now, he gets in, and it could be a much bigger move in his direction as we sit here today.
I actually think that's a very likely thing. But man, imagine if he wasn't running against people who were crazy. I mean, like, I hate to say, oh, you hate America, but I'm sorry. When you're saying we're thinking of yanking down the statute of George Washington, or when you look up at as CNN did at the marble chiseled statues of some of the greatest human beings who've ever lived, and you see them as slave owners and on stolen Indian land. When you're a politician, it's like, I don't like to say people hate America, but if you hate everything we stand for and the people who made it great, maybe you do. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, Ken, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time, and certainly we'd love to have you back in the future.
Anytime.
And of course, by all means, good luck with everything that's happening on the Media Action Network. Anything you want to leave our viewers with?
Look, my only thing is, if you're tired of whining about it and want to actually do something, this is a way to kind of roll up our sleeves. We're doing everything from embarrassing propagandists to protecting the people who need protection. And when we get big and umphy enough, we will start to build up the right piece by piece. We have to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to lose.
And we'll do for you what we can.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
All right,
gentlemen, what
what
a fun conversation. I certainly enjoyed this. I hope I didn't talk too much, but
no, it's great.
Not at all.
Good luck.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
All right, Charles, there we go. Ken LaCorte.
Yeah, it was great.
Excellent guest. Isn't this fun, this talk show interview format?
No, I think it is great, and it's a good way of bouncing around the internet, and I think we'll help him, he'll help us. It's a sign to me that we're on the right track here, that it was what you decided to do when you started Crowdsource the Truth. It wasn't controversial, but it was definitely different, a different approach. And as my own father, who's still very much alive and has a PhD in nuclear physics, has told me for a long time, with technology, if all you do is just use technology to bring your costs down, that's not really doing much. But if you use these new technologies to create a product or a service offering that's very different in a positive sense, you're on the right track. And I think that's what you've done generally with your shows. That's what we're trying to do. As he mentioned, we didn't know that he would say the long form format is the correct format, but I can't tell you how many different supposed know-it-all friends of mine from traditional media said, you're on the wrong track with Jason. You
Really?
Yeah, they were all, I think in some ways threatened.
All
right?
jerks.
Well, and honestly, I am prepared to try to like watching Fox. I like, to a certain extent, I like Lou Dobbs, although I'm getting tired of the fact that he has the same guests on, every other day or whatever. I'm prepared to try to